I just want to acknowledge Diane Swinton, who worked for many years with Michael. She's chosen not to speak, but I just wanted to acknowledge that she had a very long tenure. Was it 14 years, something like that? 13 years.
You're safe.
There's a small interregnum between Prism and there was Quantum, which I was affiliated with, and then we moved on to Hammer and Company. And there was Steve before who worked there, and Kay. Okay, I think you're up.
Am I last?
Yeah, I think you might be last, but we'll allow one or two others if there's someone who wants to say something.
There were quite a few years between all of that and when I got to work with Mike. In early 1995, we know that was when the tides were turning at Index, and I could actually read the tea leaves and see that the company that I dearly loved was no longer going to be the same, that it was going to be subsumed under the CSC brand, and I was quite in a quandary about that, because when I joined Index after having been in a number of different places, to me it was like having gotten married, you found your soulmate, and this was like forever. So I probably would have gone down with the sinking ship like some of you did. Had it for Mike Hammer finding me and recruiting me with an opportunity of a lifetime. I got an opportunity for the first time to just try to bring together everything I'd done in my entire life and build a business that would support what he was doing. And that business was actually to try to help the front lines understand what the executives were talking about when they came back from one of his seminars. And so we got to actually build education and training programs to help the front lines get it, to understand their process, that they were part of a process, their business, their roles and their accountability for making it happen, and actually to try to get them to stop resisting the change that the executives were inflicting upon them. And that was the best opportunity I'd ever had, because for a while I got to actually just think and pull stuff together. And Mike was so grateful, actually, that he tried many times to leverage himself and bring somebody in who could build a business that didn't need him. And it's hard, because when Hammer and Company is on the door and clients pay money to belong to Phoenix or any other of his programs, they actually want to see Mike, and I don't blame them. But the front line doesn't really know who Mike Hammer is. So they didn't actually even appreciate the one little videotape segment we did of Mike explaining process and football terminology, the X's and the O's. And it got rated the lowest score of the program. And I showed this to Mike and goes, "What do you know?" He said, finally, I don't have to do anything. You can go out and just, do all of this, and I can focus on what I do best. So about a year after we were working together, and we had a number of clients, or a couple of clients sign up to be pilot cases and so forth, we decided that we needed more people, we needed more space, and there was no more space to be had in his offices. So we said, you know what, we should probably spin this off into a separate company. And so I said, well, that's good, and I like that idea, and that way you can't fire me, which is a great thing when you bring all your own experience to the table. So we worked at length to try to develop a contract that would reflect what both of us needed and wanted out of this. And we spent a lot of time discussing it, got a lawyer to write it up, and then nothing ever happened. And meanwhile, I went and got office space and started this business and everything. And so one day, I walked into his office. We had an appointment, and we went into the conference room. And I said, "Can I shut the door?" And he said, "Sure." And so I shut the door, and then I stood in front of it, and I put my arms like this, and I said, "You're not getting out of this room, no matter how much you hate conflict. So you either sign the agreement, or you tell me why you can't sign the agreement, because I need to know." And he said, "No one's ever done that to me." And he said, "And secondly, how do you know I hate conflict? He's out there preaching conflict all the time." And I said, "What you don't know is I was a psychotherapist." And I said, "It's real easy, because as soon as there's any kind of personal conflict, you have a meeting, a phone call, or anything else, and you're out of here." So he said, and this was very poignant. He said, "You know what? The reason I can't sign this is because even though it's extremely fair and everything I believe in, what it would do is obligate my heirs, should anything ever happen to me, to have to buy you out if you meet all the goals and criteria we just outlined. And he said, I can't do that to them. And so he said, let's just agree to separate and part company, professionally, but continue to work together informally, referring projects to each other. And I thought at that time, this is amazing that he's thinking that far forward. We had a short time frame. I mean, I'm thinking, what are you thinking about that you think you're not going to be here, to actually be able to buy me out should that come to pass. But he was always thinking about his family. And that brings me to my other story that actually just has been with me since the day it happened. It was the first year I was working there. And I was just talking with Phyllis, trying to figure out, exactly when this happened. But his mother and her mother both passed away within about 4 months of each other. And I remember walking by Hannah's office. Hannah Will was his assistant at the time, and she was pulling her hair out and going, I don't know how to do this. And I said, do what? And she said, I have to find a synagogue in every little city in the United States where Mike might actually be speaking for the next year. He has to get to a synagogue, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, taxis would be pulling up and taking him so that he could pay his respects, and I don't know the whole tradition, but say his prayers for his mother and his mother-in-law. And that was the first glimpse I actually had of him as a person, as a man. I had seen his brilliant mind in action all over whiteboards and heard him speak, but I never had seen into his heart and his commitment to his family and to his faith and everything else. And my esteem and respect for him went far beyond all of the things he's left behind in terms of his legacy, his books, his writing, and the impact he's had on our lives from that day forward. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of what I take away from Mike, the fun parts, are that nothing is off limits. You can re-engineer anything. And that included the elevators in One Cambridge Center. You know what I'm talking about, but for some reason they just were not very fast. In fact, they were so slow. Almost every morning Mike would come up just in fits about the elevators. And one day we were in a staff meeting and he'd say, I want you to research how long or what the peak hours are of utilization. I want you to determine if there are any other ways that we can increase the speed of these elevators. And he said, we're going to re-engineer the elevator process at One Cambridge Center. And from that point on I said, nothing's off limits. I'm going to re-engineer every little mundane process to the magnificent process as long as it makes the world a better place. So I owe a lot of that legacy inside of me to Mike and having worked with him, and I will miss him.